future one. Great to see everybody here. I do have an apology for lateness from Tipper, so she'll be here in the not too distant future. And welcome back to those of you that were at the governance workshop yesterday. Hopefully, I think Carol's word she used was still fizzing. So we'll see how that pans out during the day. I'll now hand over to Chris to open us up with the karakia. And someone's got a microphone on there. Yeah, it sounds like it's gone.
Thank you, Chair. Whakataka taho ki te uru, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia makinakina ki uta, ki mataratara ki tai, he aka anati atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihe, mauri ora.
Right, thank you, Chris. I'll get Chris to open us up with some opening words and a little bit of a high level around what's coming in front of us today, and then we'll hand over to Marley to run the show.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. So I regard this as getting the machinery of council up and going. Pretty key decisions have got to be made on November 20th to formally do that. I guess my first commentary on that is that I see it as a partnership, because whilst it's how we govern the organisation and it's your committees, equally its staff have got to be able to service them. And so we've got to be in the same space that whatever we put in place works for everybody. And I think we've got to a place where we're quite aligned with what we're going to be recommending anyway, Warren, and I think that you've done a lot of work behind the scenes trying to get everybody to a space. So I don't think that we're ever going to be many poles apart on this. One of the thoughts that we'd had as an ELT was the big decision is, do you want to delegate things from council down to committees to do work, or do you want more council as a whole to be considering information and making decisions and doing the work? And I think that what we've got here is probably a little bit of a mix. There's probably a bit more thought about more councils being involved in more of what goes through council. And of course that helps for when you get to make the major decisions which aren't delegated and do sit at council. So I think that's good. So Marley's going to take us through a bunch of mandatory committees. There's other discretionary committees of council, but there's a whole bunch of these other little bits and bobs that will need to be considered at some stage too. Yeah. Just because we need to appoint members to it. But I'll leave that to Marley to go through.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Marley.
Morena councillors, thank you for those opening comments, Chris, and setting the scene. I'm glad to see the PowerPoint is up and working. We had a little bit of a hold your breath moment just as we started. I've got a number of slides to work through, and I'll take probably 20 minutes to set the scene, provide a bit of context, and then we'll pause for some discussion at the appropriate points, but do feel free to ask any questions along the way. Good to see all of the executive here today. As Chris mentioned, we have been thinking about this for a number of months in preparation for our new council, and there has been full input from all of the executive. The members have responsibility for each of the committees, so it's really important that they hear the kōrero today. And if you want to dive deeply into any specifics, then we might be calling on each of them to answer some of your questions. So looking at the purpose for today, we're looking to confirm your proposed committee structure. It was really useful to get a proposed structure from our councillors, and we understand that there is collective strong support for what's in front of us today, which makes the job relatively easy. However, it's not a fait accompli. We still have the opportunity to discuss the elements and make any refinements that might need to be made before council then finalises and adopts the committee structure and the terms of reference, to make sure that what we put in place going forward is fit for purpose. We're also going to cover off the allocation of the remuneration pool. But we'll do that when we get to the conclusion of the committee structure kōrero. Next slide. Thank you, Dave. And so just really quickly, the objectives we're looking to get out of today: confirm our overall committee structure, identify any refinements so staff can go away and make those in preparation for formal decision making. A kōrero about membership on each of the committees as well, to get a steer in that space, so that I guess we're not having to debate that through a formal council meeting. Make it as smooth as we possibly can. Where there is opportunity to, and where the discussion leads to that place, we might even talk about how we might manage workload and transferring knowledge across the full council. As Chris mentioned, we have, as a executive, talked about things like committees of the whole, and also the way that we use workshops. So we might get into that as we go through today. Next slide. So some legislative context, and it is set out in the report, so I won't dive into it too deeply, but it is useful just to set the scene. Council is required to adopt a governance structure, and that the requirements are set out in the Local Government Act. There are a bunch of mandatory committees that must be established. For example, the Regional Transport Committee and the Civil Defence Emergency Management Committee. I don't expect that we will dive too deeply into terms of reference discussions for those things, because they are mandatory, they are set out in legislation. There is little opportunity to revisit, revise those terms of reference. So in that context, we'll probably just limit it to membership. And today we'll focus primarily on those discretionary committees. An important note, whilst council will delegate responsibilities to its committees, there are certain functions that council can't delegate. And on the slide, I've identified what some of those things are, like adopting the long-term plan, the annual plan, annual report, and also appointing your chief executive. Whilst you might delegate the responsibility to committees, council will retain the decision-making authority for those things. And so those committees will simply recommend to council. Next slide, thank you. As mentioned, the executive have done a bit of work thinking about committee structure. And so that review did dive fairly deeply into the way that we operated in the 2022 to 25 council term. And what we found is that nationally, our committee structure and the governance workload was at the upper end compared to other regional councils. And so over the 2023-2024 year, council met almost 100 times formally and had an additional 40 plus workshops. Not saying that that is inappropriate, because it does ensure that council has that oversight of council business, but it does signal that perhaps there is opportunity to find streamlining areas and potentially improve our efficiency in the governance structure. Just as a useful piece of information also, 60% of the agenda reports were for information only, rather than looking for decision making. And so that also signalled that potentially we could be using workshops for those sorts of things in a more effective way. And the other interesting thing that we found is that limited membership on some of our committees led to or could restrict the amount of knowledge that was held across council. And so we found ourselves in a position at times where a really important kaupapa was being rediscussed and relitigated at the council level. So we're thinking through how we might avoid that going forward with better use of workshops and increased membership across committees. Next slide. That's all right.
So just to pick up on that, Marley, while Dave's doing his bit, is so you're proposing that democracy is working through that space to improve make things flow a bit better, and there'll be recommendations coming through on the 20th. Is that what I'm hearing, or you'll be more talking to the committees once they get established on how things might work better in that space?
Yeah, I guess some operational decisions can be made in the way that we implement process. So, for example, when scheduling workshops in the past, we've done so as the need for workshops has arisen, but we've looked forward to next year, and what we've done is plugged in workshops regularly throughout the year, so a couple a month, so that we're planning rather than reacting to the need for workshops. So that's an operational decision that we've made. If through the course of today we identify any other improvements that could be made, we'll certainly look to implement those things, but not necessarily need firm council decisions on it, because a lot of these things we can just do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Marley, for what we've seen so far. Hey, just wanted to pick up on that 60% of agenda items were information. I know that last time we did talk about the possibility of maybe having webinars available rather than full workshops, and then people can maybe watch them at their own pace before a workshop. Just to streamline the process a little bit more, and then it's sort of on file as well for referring back to as well. Just wanted to bring that one up to start with, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you for raising that. Webinars, yeah, really useful, a really useful mechanism to share information with others. They do take a bit of time and resource to put together, but we'll certainly bear that in mind. With regard to our workshops, we do record them, and so councillors can always access those recordings at any time, as can the general public. But take on board the suggestion about webinars, and we'll continue to think on how those could be used at some point.
Thanks, Marley. Gary.
Yeah, basically on the same thread that Angela raised, it's just you've got to be very careful about information overload, and I think you throw so much data there, it's sometimes hard to decipher what's in there. So, I'd encourage management to keep that a bit more succinct and give us the details of the facts, what we need to know, rather than drowning us in data.
Thanks, Gary. I'll come to Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. What I've found over the years is if people like it more succinct, then they want more information to see the information behind it. If we give more information, they want it more succinct. I think it's probably for the council trying to get the balance right, and it might take a while to get it right. But we'll try and get it so it meets everybody, because everyone comes from different places and what they know and they need. Some people are kind of more analytical and like to get in behind the scenes, and others don't. So I take your point. We'll try and get a balance that suits everybody. Yes, we can.
Thanks, Chris. Ben.
Marley, just the 96 meetings, does that include the JMAs? Okay, so it's not just council meetings, it's also, yeah, okay, so because that's 5 times, 3 times a year, sometime, or 4 times a year. So between 2 and 4 times a year. So that adds quite a significant amount of essentially mandatory meetings.
Mandatory, yes.
Yeah.
Some of our co-governance forums meet once a year. So it's anywhere between once and 4 times a year.
Thank you. Dave, you good to go? Yeah. You made that sound like I should have known.
Rightio. So next slide is all about your proposed structure. As Chris mentioned, it's very much aligned with the thinking that ELT got to after the review. Many of the committees proposed are a carryover from 2022-2025 Strategy and Policy Committee of the Whole, Integrated Catchment Management, the CERC Committee, CE Employment and Remuneration, Risk and Assurance, by order, Environmental Performance. Finance also, although here councillors are really keen to increase the membership, signalling the importance of that space. A WRC Transport Committee, which is a new concept for Waikato Regional Council, although many councils across the country do have a similar committee. We'll dive into the detail soon. And also an additional new committee, Regional Resilience and Development. In fact, this one's now called Regional Growth and Resilience. Yep. And again, we'll dive into the detail of that new one shortly. And just a nod to the mandatory committees and a reminder, you have a bunch, 10, and these will continue to operate. Next slide.
Thanks,
Dave.
Robbie.
Actually, mine was on the last slide. The 96 and the, what was it, 40
41.
something, 49 workshops. How much different was that than the Trinium before? Because I remember that number when we first got elected and we went, holy shit, that's a big number. So was it worse or better than the Trinium before? Eh? So we're better.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, over the last 3 terms,
Yeah.
we've certainly found opportunities to refine the governance structure and the way that we operate. So there has been a reduction over time. Yet we're still right up there compared with others. But again, I'm not suggesting that where we landed last term is inappropriate, but it's just useful to understand where we stack up.
But if what Ben just said before, if the ones with statutory, ones that we have, the JMAs and others, where does that put us then? Are we in the same ballpark as everybody else, or is it still that we're higher? Because no other regional councils most probably got as many JMAs as what we have, and so I'm not blaming it on those. If you get down to the basic statistics, what are we different than how much different are we for other reasons? You know what? Yeah.
Can I come back to that? I do have the analysis here at my fingertips,
Yeah.
but I'd rather carry on and then come back.
Okay, come back to it in a different spot.
Yep.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
can answer that later on today. No problem.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, we get your question, Katarona.
Well, it's not a question, it's actually, the JMAs is based on the Waikato River settlement. Yeah, so therefore no other place in New Zealand has the same settlement on their riverway. So after the government did what they did with the Waikato River and realized that it's complex, they also announced that they wouldn't be doing the same thing for other riverways. Hence why, and there's only at the moment, it's the Crown that tells WRC who their JMAs are with. Yeah. And mostly at the moment it's with settled iwi. So within the Waikato district, you've got something like so many iwi, but in Hauraki, for instance, they won't do JMAs at the moment with all of the other 12 entities except for the main board, which is the Hauraki Trust Board. We're waiting on them. That's the only JMA they will do with them. So we are different to everybody else, unfortunately. This is, just something that happened, and because the Waikato River was exactly the first one in the whole of whatever, and the reasons around the Waikato River, one is the plane change one is JMAs. So hence why we're different. Well, not that we want to be different, it's just the fact that that's the only way they could deal with the iwi on the riverway was through JMAs with WRC.
Thanks, Kira. I think we need to keep the relevance of the number of committees and meetings as relevant to us being able to do a good job. And that's not necessarily relevant to South Canterbury or someone else. So, it's relevant to us and how we see the efficiency in doing our stuff. Ben,
Just very briefly, do mana whakahono, which are effectively compulsory, is that going to add to our meetings list?
Only if council decides that it wants to include obligations to meet at a governance level.
Okay, so you could choose not to meet at governance level. Yeah, thank you.
did you want to add something?
Well, it's just that the reasons there are mana whakahono is mostly because there are a lot of iwi who can't do JMAs.
Yeah.
They can't do them. And so therefore this was the Crown's way in the RMA to satisfy some of those iwi, in other words, who did want to have mana whakahono. And it's not just for regional council, Koto, it's for all councils. We can have a mana whakahono with territorials as well.
Back to you, Marley.
Oh, thank you. And just to add, the number of meetings that we have in the co-governance space is locked in by things like agreements and legislation. So there is little opportunity to change that. Next slide. So this is where I want to just dive into a little bit more detail with regard to the new proposed committees, starting with the transport space. So in the paper, you will have noticed that there are two tiers proposed here. The first is generally in line with what you've seen in previous terms, where we have a committee set up for public transport, where we have territorial authority membership. Last term, it was a future-proof implementation related subcommittee. But this time round, the proposal is a regional public transport subcommittee that reports directly through to the regional transport committee, which is mandatory, a mandatory body. A dotted line will remain to the future-proof area because of the relationship there. And the new bit is the WRC Transport Committee reporting directly to council.
Just so you, Warren, I'm just getting a printout of that for each of you, knowing that you can't read all the words on it.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. And rather than me going into the detail, how about I hand over to the expert?
Yep.
Phil.
Before you do that, Chris, did you want a question or do you want to wait to hear Phil's explanation on things?
I'm happy to wait until Phil's done his bit.
Thank you.
Thanks. Leave a lot on.
Morena Kote, thanks for the opportunity. Just to talk you through the thinking here. So many of the larger regions have a transport committee. So Auckland as a unitary obviously does, but Wellington has a transport committee. Canterbury has a regional delivery committee, which is where public transport and various things are reported to. The thinking here is that in the last triennium, the opportunity to engage with a council committee regularly about transport matters was limited. And that played out through some of the big conversations that we brought to you through the long-term plan and the contract renewal process is a good example, where we would really appreciate having more time with a group of councillors to talk about those topics in more detail. There's also an opportunity to provide more of the regular reporting through a committee structure like that, as well as potentially things like our customer roadmap our customer satisfaction surveys, potentially starting to form a relationship with our operators who you don't get to mix with very often. So the thinking around the internal opportunity is contained there. From an external perspective, the Statutory Regional Transport Committee has a very clear mandate. And during the last triennium, aspects of public transport reporting had to go to that committee because the future-proof PT subcommittee only covered the future-proof area. So we diluted the focus of that committee by needing to bring other topics to it. The model that's proposed here of having a regional public transport subcommittee takes forward the recommendations of the future-proof public transport subcommittee in the last triennium, as well as some conversations that occurred prior to the election here. Alongside the commitment that was made to districts and city councils as part of the regional rating transition, that there would be an opportunity and a channel for them to engage with us around regional public transport planning and integrated delivery. The concept of a regional PT subcommittee is also similar, although slightly different, to the Regional Connections Committee that you had in 2019 to 2022, which reported to council rather than to RTC, but enabled that regional conversation to occur. The concept of that dotted line to the Future-Proof Implementation Committee is because the metrospatial plan that Future-Proof has for the Hamilton and wider surrounding area will report to FPIC as it had in the previous triennium, but the connection with public transport services and that wider engagement needs to be maintained. So the dotted line shown on the plan there is about enabling that to occur. And there are some suggestions in the terms of reference for FPIC and also for that regional PT subcommittee as to how that might occur, but that's for your consideration. So happy, Chair.
Yeah, just before we go to questions, Phil, can you outline how the membership sits in the Regional Transport Committee and the Regional Public Transport Subcommittee? So how many members from here would sit in that space, and who the other players are in those two spaces?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the Land Transport Management Act establishes the structure of regional transport committees as having two representatives from the Regional Council, one of whom needs to be the chair, and then a minimum of one member for every other district in the region, and a mandatory membership, a voting membership from NZTA. Over the years, the opportunity to have non-voting members on and off that committee has changed through legislation. In the last triennium, the RTC has included a representative from KiwiRail. That is legislated for Auckland and Wellington, but isn't legislated elsewhere. But that membership has been maintained by us for a long time. We've also had reps from the Disability Action Access Mobility side who've attended those meetings. There's an opportunity to talk about iwi representation on that committee, and that's something to consider. There have also been suggestions about recommendations for economic development representation and potentially AA representation. Those are all conversations for the RTC to have potentially, but that's how that committee is structured. The Regional PT Subcommittee, we have drafted a terms of reference that effectively says the Regional Council and Hamilton would have 2 representatives each, and all other districts would have 1. NZTA, KiwiRail would have non-voting representation on that committee.
Okay.
That's all for conversation.
Yep.
Mr. Warren, so I have been contacted by Hamilton City indicating they would like more membership on a PT committee. So I just want to throw that in the mix because they have a lot at stake with PT, obviously, in the region, with the amount of the PT network that is in Hamilton. That's kind of where their interest is. But it has kind of ramifications and implications for wider membership as well, which you might want to talk to.
It's just a comment, which is that other councils have the same issue potentially that we have, in that the messaging goes to a small group of councillors and then it's harder to share across the whole of their organisations. And I suspect Hamilton are thinking about that in advance and thinking about how they can get that broader knowledge. Just a thought though, for that subcommittee, my suggestion would be that we have an agenda that's well structured so that there are definitely guaranteed opportunities to engage in the right ways with different parts of our region every time. So starting with policy, strategy, those types of things, and then having discussion about regional bus networks before we focus specific time on every agenda to Hamilton, I think would help mitigate some of that concern that everybody won't get a fair chance to talk about their interests. But again, that's a conversation for that subcommittee to have at the right time.
Okay, it's quite a hot topic, so I've got a speaking order of Chris, Liz, Noel, Angela, and then Robbie. So I'll come to you, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. CE, for raising that issue, because that was exactly one of the questions I was going to ask, because on our slide, internal WRC, Hamilton City contribute 80% of the revenue to our transport pool. And as far as I'm concerned, they should be at the table for two reasons. And this is probably a statement more than a question for you, Phil, but it will be a question. And the first question is, was Regional Council consulted by Hamilton City when they decided on setting up all these speed humps throughout the city, putting bus stops into the middle of the roads, putting these impediments to buses getting around the city in an efficient manner? Were we consulted or not?
We work with Hamilton City Council every day, so we would have known that they were doing
Did
that.
they consult on those issues?
If they had formally consulted on them, we would have been a party to that consultation, I guess.
Well, were we a part of the consultation? That's what I'm asking.
At what level? Yeah.
At a proper director to director level, like we're the ones that are having to sign these contracts with the bus company. We're the ones that are suffering the consequences of the buses being slowed down, or our ratepayers are. So we should have had some input into this process of slowing down the buses around the city, because the infrastructure on the city, as far as I can see, is going to be critical to the future of public transport. And if we're not being engaged with Hamilton City at the base level on that committee, then I don't see how we're ever going to make any real progress in terms of making an efficient public transport system.
The funding for those types of projects came from the SURF pot that the previous government had, and we were engaged with Hamilton City as we work with them every day on those topics. The committee, the Future Proof PT subcommittee, had spent a significant amount of the last triennium working through LTP alignment in terms of the funding for studies and investigations, and there's been a whole load of work done around freight, around bus rapid transit corridors, and around a whole range of aspects of how we change our bus networks to meet the needs of the Metro Spatial Plan, which is effectively what's in your future contracts for buses. Though that really was the core of what that previous PT subcommittee was focused on for 3 years.
So just picking up on that, if I may, so looking at the structure we have in front of us now, so with potentially two members, maybe more, sitting on that regional public transport subcommittee, the issues that, like Chris has now raised, we would be well aware of those issues as they came into that committee, which would then be able to be articulated back to our council for some input. Is that how that will work going forward?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Equally, you having a transport.
So Phil, can I just get you to clarify? So Hamilton has its own internal structure for infrastructure in the city, including transport. Yep. I think the question is, do they raise those issues, and is that agreed at a level like previously at the Future Proof Implementation Committee level with the PT? Or, as Warren has just asked, will they then come up from what they're proposing to do into this committee? And do they have to? Would it be mandatory, or would that be discretionary on their behalf?
So they would continue to bring topics like that to the subcommittee. We would engage with them at that level and bring things back to the WRC Transport Committee as required for your wider committee conversations. They're not well, they're not necessarily mandatory, but from a partnership perspective, it would be good for all districts and ourselves to be bringing topics to that subcommittee for governance level conversation.
Chris?
Can I-
Yeah.
Phil, what I want to know is, did the regional council have any input into the process of slowing buses down around the city? Did we say, no, that's going to cost the ratepayers more money if you're going to put all those speed humps in, if you're going to put all these bus stops in the middle of the road, which is going to stop traffic getting through to the hospital, fire engine, ambulances? Did we have any input into that or not? If we did, why did we agree to it? If we didn't, why not?
So what I might do, and Phil, it may not have been within your tenure. So Angela, is it something you could speak to? Is that something you're aware of? If I can get Angela a microphone, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe, Mr. Chair.
I mean,
my
maybe we
point is-
park that and come back to that.
Okay.
I'm trying to get to the point why this is internal WRC. To me, this is a Hamilton City-wide issue. We cannot sit here in isolation from the City Council
Yeah.
making these decisions. They can't sit there in isolation from us and get a proper infrastructure looking forward. That's
Yeah.
really what it's all about.
So was my question to Phil, is will those sorts of things be brought through Regional Public Transport Subcommittee, which we will have a couple of members sitting on. Hamilton City will have a couple of members sitting on. Districts will have one member each sitting on. Then that's the question was asked, will that then feed through to us as A council and B WRC Transport Committee? Currently, the answer is yes.
Hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked in the past, and we didn't have the structure in the past. We also didn't have a number of councillors over transport in the past. So I think this is a better outcome, and we can work at that, and we can certainly articulate to Hamilton City that any of those sort of decisions we want to be part of. I think transport will come together in a far better state, and there'll be far more of us across it with this type of structure than what we've had in the past. Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Warren. Look, I completely agree with you. I've sat on most of these committees actually over quite a few years. If you want to see the level of detail around where speed bumps are going to be and how they affect your city or your towns, then an internal transport committee is probably the way to go, because I don't think we've seen the level of detail in the Regional Public Transport Subcommittee or the other committee in the past. So if you want detail, then I think we need to definitely look at establishing the internal one. I do think, Phil, that the committee, as it stands, the Regional Transport Committee probably does need some work on its agenda, which you alluded to, which I'm pleased to hear, because I think there is some, there's definitely room for improvement there. I think we can do more as a committee. It's a hot potato, actually, to be honest, across all regions, because speed bumps in particular aren't just, haven't been a problem just in the city. It's actually reached out to the regions quite significantly.
Yeah.
A lot of ambulance services and things have been quite, active and kind of, being quite upset that they can't get to the Waikato Hospital in the time that they used to. So it is something regional wide. It's an issue, I believe. In terms of the city representation, I don't have a problem with that, and especially, as Chris has alluded to, 80% of the revenue comes from the city. But let's just remember that this is often a population argument around who gets more services, and the regions will never win that argument. The larger populations here in the city. So, there has to be a bit of a balance when we're discussing those issues, or where the next service is going to be. I've been a big advocate for getting some extra services in Cambridge, but you don't win when you don't have the population of the city. So that's just always an argument you're going to lose. That's probably all my comment, but I'm very supportive of the structure. I think it makes sense.
Thanks for that input, Liz.
Maybe just to comment that the Regional Transport Committee does have a significant role, and it's a really important committee, and it's about regional leadership and talking about the importance of investment in the Waikato region nationally with ministers and potentially as widely as possible. So the opportunity that committee presents to the whole region is significant, and we should approach the way that we manage that work in that way, whether it's related to road safety or roads of national significance or funding for anything else. So that would be a response. And I think if we can get a structure and an agenda that gives us the space to discuss things at that level, that committee will work really well.
Thanks, Phil. Noel?
3 or 4 things, but just to come to comments you made, you asked Phil, is that how it would work? My thoughts are that it's how council wants it to work that's more important. And if we want it to work in a certain way, that's how we should set it up, not how others set it up. So coming back to my comments then, I'm okay with the structure. I think the same person who chairs the council committee should chair the regional transport committee and should be on the future-proof implementation committee. That's from past experience. And going back to the Hamilton, it's a thorny issue that's been around for years, and I too, like Liz, have been on RTC and Public Transport Committee, and certainly at the time, and it was the personalities that got in the way of the Public Transport Subcommittee. And so we ended up with the Public Transport Committee being disbanded and put back into RTC. So that's done full circle. The reality for me is that Hamilton does have 80%, and I would rather see a focus on Hamilton. And it's hard, you either separate it and have 2 meetings or one following the other, or you put it into the agenda that you get Hamilton out of the way, because if they've got the noisemakers, which that we did have back then, that everything was about Hamilton and to help with the rest of the region. The reality is, without Hamilton, the region doesn't function, and the people in Hamilton who want to get out and need to get out can't either. So yeah, they forget the integration at times, and Hamilton-centric is not the answer, unless you absolutely manage that. And I'm just a bit concerned about having it in the same space as the regional. It's got to somehow connect, but the experience from my time on RTC and the likes was that the domination of personalities was difficult to manage, and the committee self-destructed. So I just caution people as to where we end up. It's the right thing to try and have the integrated approach, but with Hamilton and obviously a change in. Thank you for your support.
Listening to you and giving a bit of
it's the support. Yes, thank you. So I think I've made my point on that. Now, the other thing is, Bill made comment about different people wanting to be part of or considering being part of. I've been on previous regional council committees when I was either a landowner or district councillor, and you get all those add-ons, and I'm thinking in particular like the Waipa Catchment Committee. They just didn't add any value. They sat there, obviously mute at times, and nice to have them in the room. I'm not including the disability people; they must be there. But we had Mercury Energy, we had Doc, and they just weren't part of the conversation. Keep it simple and keep it to the people who have got real skin in the game. Thank you. But otherwise I support, but do really support the same person being the chair across all those. Thanks.
Thanks, Noel. Angela?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's always interesting to look back and see where we've come from and where we're going. And like you've said, Noel, full circle at times. Yeah, I agree with what's been said so far, and especially Chris, your points about tying up the infrastructure and services. That's one thing that's always sort of been a stumbling block. So far, HCC would say, yep, we've got, that infrastructure in place but in the LTP, but it would be year 7, so it's not going to happen. I think given that Hamilton City is 80% of what's been said, giving them 2 members and us 2 members, I think we need to get that balance a little bit better, upping those numbers, and where it is more Hamilton focused, I think would go a long way to making sure that relationship is managed well, and that we get that feedback back to both councils as well. Makes complete sense. So whether that's the 4 Hamilton City constituent councillors feeding in there alongside HCC members, yeah, whatever that might look like, we can get to the detail in consultation with them. Yeah, agree with Noel about you know, that the same person, it makes sense for that transfer of knowledge and that leadership to be the same person doing the committees. The PT subcommittee, perhaps the deputy of RTC could take that lead, but yeah, happy to work out that detail through. And that link to future-proof is vitally important because so much of future-proof is transport and connectivity. So yeah, I think that was all for now. Thank you. Oh, one more thing, sorry, just around the membership, which I'll be talking about that now, or maybe with the tours, that I know we have had the police with the safety in the past, so keen to see them come back on. And just around the disability sector, that I felt that the focus is too narrow with it just being CCS, that I'd prefer that the membership was opened up to other disabilities, seen, unseen as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, did you want to comment? Phil?
Just one comment there. It was remiss of me not to mention that the police could potentially be a member of, or a non-voting member of RTC. I have spoken to them recently and they don't have capacity right now to join the committee. They're very keen to do a presentation to the committee on all of their work soon after it's formed. And then, you know, potentially through the next couple of years that could change, but that's their response right now.
So Robbie.
Thank you, Warren. I'll take my question off later.
Mike?
Yeah. Just on the police, I know on State Highway 3 working group, which I co-chaired, we always got police that represents on that committee, so could be the opportunity on the regional transport. Just to endorse what Phil said before, that this WRC Regional Transport Committee is such an important committee because it does, out of all the committees, it does reach out to all the TAs, having representative of the TAs on there, being mayors or deputy mayors or some representative. And not only that, you've got the close connection with NZTA, Kiwi Rail, and then into central government. So it is that. I know some councillors were frustrated, you know, the last term the PT, and it is a huge, not only political bull, but it is a huge workload on the staff in here with everything. My only concern with creating this new committee, which I'm not against or anything like that, is just if there is double up in the future proof, because a lot of the PT, and Angela might want to speak to this, there was a lot of PT that did go through that future proof committee because it is representative with Waikato and the Hamilton City on there. So it was a big in there. So I just, you know, I'm real keen on no double ups in this term, you know, and which is a double up on costs.
Thanks, Mike. Jennifer.
Thank you. I want to draw the councillor's attention to the similarities between ICM and the public transport side of things. I haven't often thought of it that way, but it is getting to that point. And when you look at our budget, you know, they both make up a significant portion. So what we have got in integrated catchment management is 2 subcommittees for level of service discussions and such. I was just talking with Angela before, and to try and address Hamilton City's desire to partner up more in our discussions on infrastructure and services, and really addressing what Chris's really valid point, I would really push for having a rural regional public transport subcommittee, so the surrounds of Hamilton and the rural side in one, and that's where we can have a membership similar to what's proposed, but also having a separate Hamilton City Partnership Subcommittee, which is actually possibly quite similar to the JMAs. You know, we're in a partnership in the fact that we both have a significant part there, and you could have the membership there that they were asking. You could have the 4 Hamilton constituency councillors here, and say 4 of them. You could even add one in, such as whoever's the deputy or chair of RTC. So a 5 and 5 to have those really in-depth making Hamilton public transport work discussions. And the other one is where we cover off the rest. So it's two geographical areas. It's the level of service discussion split up similar like ICM. I think that would go a long way towards addressing a lot of concerns. The best we've come up with so far, I thought.
Different membership on it.
Yeah, so the Hamilton reps would make sense to, for two of them to be the same on that, or one or two on that rural one. Yeah, and councillors, yeah.
Oh,
Just one further point that I did have and I didn't note. I actually think this committee should be a committee of the whole. So far as the major issues that we've got Tahuia coming up, and I understand there might have been an offer to extend that for a year. Whether that's going to be, yeah, that is. But, issues about rolling stock, issues about buses, and what route we go down with the contracts and who owns buses and investment of 200 million plus and all that. I think listening to the discussion, I've got it noted here, consider committee of the whole, and then everyone's involved. Okay, thanks.
it was a question I was going to ask at the end. Liz?
Yeah, look, I would absolutely support that. The time feels right. Sometimes, there's some trainees you need more, committee members, and I'm a big supporter. I'm actually a huge advocate of full committees anyway. It's very efficient. Just to Mike's earlier point around double ups, I did see double ups in the previous training around some of the public transport future-proof agendas coming through. So yeah, we have to be really, really careful of that, I think, and we just don't want to be wasting anyone's time. But to Jen's point around potentially separate rural and city committees, now that's good, except for, I know for some of the Hamilton services, when I look at the data, let's just take Hamilton to Cambridge, for example. So many Hamiltonians use the Hamilton to the university portion, so they are intertwined, and I don't know if you can separate it out. So it's just a point. I think it's a great idea, but it's something to be really mindful of.
Phil?
If I may, I was going to make that point too, that wherever you set the boundary, we have public transport trips that are crossing that boundary. And this was one of the issues with the previous training, where the zone was the MSP area or the future-proof area. We then had things that were coming in to that area from outside. The only other thought would be around the administration of having two subcommittees, but that's for further conversation.
Right, I'd like to move this along. So, just for the staff's indication, just a raise of hands, who would like to see it as a committee of the whole? So this is the WRC Transport Committee. Okay, so potentially we've got 4 or 5 that don't want to sit on it as such. So, just a note, Marley, that so we're probably still looking at that 8 or 9 members by the sound of it. So. And this is the thing. So the piece I sent out with potential memberships and that, please let us know. You haven't come and seen me, so I'm sure we can work. I'm sure. I'm not going down that road right now, Tipper. There's plenty. Yeah. Good. So this is just a starting. So please indicate over the next week or so, where you do see potentially sitting on more or less, or how that may look. Thank you, Phil. Next one up, Molly. Yeah.
Thank you. Really useful direction on the transport governance space. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next slide. This one on regional growth and resilience. Again, it's a new one, and so probably does need some focused attention and discussion. This committee is proposed by councillors, so just checking in that we've got the responsibilities and powers right. So the intention is that this committee will provide leadership and oversight of economic development, resilience, and focus on things like water and energy security, the implementation of those things. So the powers that have been identified currently are there up on the slide in a summarised way. Essentially, enabling it to fulfil its job. One thing to point out, which is quite a interesting addition to the terms of reference, is that in situations where the committee might be thinking about economic and resilience issues, and those things might lead to the development of policy or strategy, then there will be a need to connect in with strategy and policy committee with recommendations. So I really just wanted to test those specific terms of reference with council to see if we're heading in the right direction with these. Invite your feedback.
No.
My question would be, doesn't appear to have any decision-making ability. So lead, thank you. It doesn't, me, I don't like this, you know, talk fest, and I haven't shown, I support this, but I don't need to be on it. I just, what's the point of just having a discussion and saying we recommend to somebody else to do something? To me, yeah, maybe it is. So for me, we should be, if we've got a role, about them. That's my concern here. Thanks.
Jennifer.
Thank you. No, interesting points, Noel. This is interesting points. Thank you. Just made notes to add to it. No, this Regional Growth and Resilience Committee is definitely one I'm taking the most interest based on what people know of me. To Noel's point, a subcommittee is a possibility to strategy and policy of this. If it is only 6 members and if it has no decision-making powers, to me it sounds like a subcommittee to Stratton Pole. However, you could boost it to 9 members like some of the others and give it decision-making powers. It's just an option for the room to consider. The other point I wanted to make is, because I've heard a lot about not wanting to double up, and I'm really turning my mind a lot to where does the environmental ecosystem health work sit? Because we have got biodiversity and biosecurity talked about in ICM. We have still got EPC, although fairly small committee. And we talk in the terms of reference here about linking environmental, economic and social well-being. But we only really talk about the economic and social in it. So we have the opportunity to put the environmental stuff into this committee and making it very holistic. One reason I would advocate for it as an option is that I've heard a lot about people mention in the last little while about balancing the environment and the economy. I actually think that's quite old language to use. Things these days have to be win-win for the environment and the economy. And the balancing is very much a win-lose. That's the way it's at least happened a lot of the time. So I'd go more holistic perhaps and make this quite a important committee that does the work, or keep it as a subcommittee to Stratton Pole. Those are just some thoughts to consider so that we don't get the double ups. There's definitely something else, if you don't want to put environment into this, of having it an EPC or ICM, obviously, but that's kind of coming up in the later discussion.
Thanks, Jen. Chris.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with Jennifer that I think it should be a subcommittee of Stratton Pole. That's really where it sits. But for me, the thing that's missing out of here is, and the thing which I had requested at the beginning, I believe this committee should be responsible for having either directly or an outside external group to review our policies which have an impact on the economy of the region. Because it's easy enough for council to impose policies on the region, land change one being a classic example, that will impede economic growth and development. And I think it's important that we get a focus on these issues from people who are out there experiencing the impacts of our policies and take that into a committee which can then review the policies sitting within our Stratton Pole area. So I just see that as an extra, definitely a response. If we're going to set a subcommittee up, that should have powers to co-opt expertise in there to assist with that review process. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Liz?
Yeah, Chris, that makes sense, actually. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. No, I'm learning a lot, which is great. You know, with the demise of Te Waka, I think that the region's eyes will be on this committee. I think we need to make sure that we get the terms of reference absolutely right. I think we'll be criticised if we don't perform, because it does look to me like we're looking to take quite a lead role around that economic development for the region. So really, really critical that we put, you know, we get this right. Otherwise, we could look a little slow, or we could lose, I guess, faith in the region could lose faith with us. I see a really big part of this potential committee focusing on artificial intelligence, AI, because when you look at the region and the regional economic developers staff that are already doing that role, they are all working on tech. So the forums that I know about that I've been I've been attending out there in the region is all about where is tech leading us economically? What does the future look like? And I think that we need to focus on AI a little bit more and give that a bit more, I guess, so a bit more priority in its terms of reference.
Good points. Thank you, Liz. Tipper?
Total core, support the points made. Hope that for our sake, Chris, that the review's the smaller portion and it's the enablers that this committee focuses on. Regional enablers to economic development will be perhaps the sweet spot for what the Waikato plan and Te Waka were not able to deliver on. And I would consider that it's got to have that key relationship to all the regional conversations anyway. So again, I'm all for framing it in the positive, because then it can do something. Otherwise, if it's reviewing what hasn't been done, we get more of what hasn't been done. But I support Councillor Hughes in terms of let's not turn over rocks that were tried and tested. Let's go for the new strategies and the new gold. And I just note that the regional economy requires a lot on the iwi investment here. So understanding what the enablers of iwi investment are would be helpful to our council, because it's not particularly known by the wider sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Tipper. No.
No, I'm not.
No? You are now. Ben?
Well, I support this committee. I think it's part of our purpose of healthy environment, vibrant community, strong economy. We need to focus on that. Anyone who read Chamber of Commerce feedback has just talked about the importance of the economy for the region, and also mentioned the need for an energy strategy. So that's quite timely that that's surfacing here. Just to Noel's point about that recommend to strategy and policy, I notice under powers for No, you said that you didn't like the idea of this committee recommending to strategy and policy. Yeah, sorry.
My point was that this doesn't seem to have any decision-making abilities, and that needed to be addressed. Recommending, I was concerned that it's just a talk fest. So that's what I'm trying to.
No, I just draw your attention to the powers for EPC, which is item number D, we'll come to shortly, making recommendations to strategy and policy in respect of emerging environmental issues. So, no, but what I'm saying is that EPC recommends, this has got the same, this is recommending on economic resilience. So if you're going to modify one, you'd modify the other as well. Yep. Yeah.
And again, as both Chris, Liz, Tipper, etc., have pointed out, that this committee could end up with as quite a big piece of work in a lot of areas. around the thing and what's developing and that sort of thing, the effects our policies are having, et cetera, et cetera. So certainly I think it needs to stand on its own 2 feet as such. And again, we touched in our previous workshop just on the drowning nature of bombarding Stratton Pole with everything. You know, we need to have trust in the committee to go away, raise the issues, look at them, and then bring that information back.
Final point then, my concern would be that we must be agile, and if we need to change the tools so that the committee, once it gets up and realises what it needs, is that we change the tools if they need decision-making powers in certain areas. That's what I think we need to.
That abilities and everything, hopefully going forward. Yeah, Ali. Oh, sorry, Mike.
That's okay.
You're behind the screen.
I just
Right.
endorse everything that everyone said. The big thing for me is outcomes. We didn't, as far as I could see, we didn't have any outcomes out of Te Waka with the investment that we had, and that was kind of my first term, and getting my head around that. But even in the last 3 years, outcomes is what we need out of this committee, and especially with the environment the way it is. We look at the mills that have closed down in our areas. We look at, the economy the way it is, the highest number of unemployment, and just to endorse what Tipper said, especially down my area, big iwi investment in geothermal and stuff like that, and that does create jobs. They're building a new binary at Te Mihi. So I think it's real important that this committee does really try and have some outcomes for the ratepayers and to actually show something at the end of this 3-year term.
I'll come to Jen and then Chris.
Yeah, real quick. I just think we should have a think about how this committee involves the TAs, or their economic development managers. Probably just report up, perhaps, and also how we invite others in with, and their thoughts that have been mentioned. Iwi Chamber of Commerce. Potentially, we did have a lot of guest speakers in the Climate Action Committee. Worked really well as well. So how we do that, if you can just give your mind some considerations on that for the terms of reference if it needs mentioning. But we can do guests anytime, obviously.
Chris.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I won't waste people's time on this because it's probably not the right time to be talking about it, but I'm picking up on a point that Mikhail made. I agree. I think we need to have some sort of goal for this thing, and what I'd like to suggest is we know our Waikato GDP at the moment is 9% in New Zealand. I'd like to see the goal moved to 10 to 10.5% over the next 3 years. And I think that should be a goal of this committee. Thank you.
Thanks for that input. Karen, if I can just come across to you, do you want to just throw something in here at the moment? We've obviously now got an employee in this space. We've got budget in this space. I just, potentially when are we going to see a little bit of feedback in this space?
Morning, councillors. You hear me all? Yeah,
Yep.
Great. Well, we were talking about that, our employee and myself just yesterday, and very interested in your direction from this workshop, because you will recall when Tarek came to present to council, he was having a paper ready for the November council meeting. Yep. And so we were just seeking direction about where do you want this paper to go to the council meeting in November, or wait until we've constituted this committee, can have a workshop, understand councillors' direction, and work with the thinking and the recommendations that our staff member would like to put to you and discuss with you. So really, it's with you, and we'll take your direction. So we are ready to go.
So there's, to me, my personal opinion is there's no need to hold back then. Let's see that in the November meeting.
Council meeting?
Agree.
November council meeting. Anyone opposed to that? No. So, yep, let's see it. It'll get us, those that haven't met Tarek, we'll be able to meet him and hear where he's got to over the last couple of months.
Terrific. And just because, as has been noted, the terms of reference might need some further consideration and smoothing, can we do that post the council meeting and post constitution of this, or is that problematic? Because
No, I'd rather, from what you've picked up from the discussion today, I think it's positive for us to see that articulated in what comes to us in that meeting.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Chris.
Thank you. So that's been really valuable feedback on, especially on that sort of economic development side and resilience of the Waikato economy. Just another factor, in case there's anybody wants to comment on regional community adaptation planning and risk management. I mean, obviously that's huge, and with some of the government directions coming out, there was clearly an oversight the importance of this committee there. I was just wondering if there's any other feedback on that councillors might to make.
Is, my concern is the decision making, so is there a last bullet point that says, and the authority to make decisions that impact all those, because as you made the comment, you don't want to see everything coming back to Stratton Pole.
But to me, picking up on just what Tipper's comment was, I think it is looking to recommend to council. There's got to be trust in committees, etc. They're doing the mahi, so let's see them bring it to council. Does that speak to your point?
Yeah, let's see how it goes, because I think over time we might just top of it.
And again, here's where things can, it's a moving beast as such. Jennifer, and then Keith.
Yep, I agree with what was just discussed. And to answer Chris's question, obviously it's always taken a big interest on the adaptation work. It would be good for this council to see the overview of the adaptation work happening, and it makes total sense that it can happen here. And I would just want to advocate that the rest of the region should have that overview come to them somewhere as well. And I'd like to see that happen perhaps in the Civil Defence Committee, because it's so closely linked. It's simply a paper that comes once in a while, but they have a membership from every TA, and so they would have an ability to see what everyone is doing. It might, yeah, so that's my view.
Keith.
Yeah, and just like to pick up on Chris and Clay's comments. We've talked about this in many different venues and that sort of thing. We need to be on the front foot in terms of interaction with the politicians and whoever the politicians are going to be in the next period of government. And for that reason, I think we've got to make it a high priority. And I'm looking at Liz here. We need to also push for the equivalent of what Auckland's got as a minister for Auckland. We need a minister for Waikato. We aren't well represented here, and we need to lift our demands and our profile in that respect.
Very quickly, Ben.
Oh, just to pick up on that point, I think also it's really important to network with the mayors and the TAs, because you've got to look at what South Waikato needs before you talk to ministers. So yeah.
Yep. So obviously that is the mayoral forum. That's where I will be sitting, and I do promise to bring that back to you guys, as is something I've articulated. Liz.
I was just going to say, mayoral forum, future-proof partners. Those are the two key places that hopefully we can, get some improvement.
Right, Marley, I think we've beaten that one to death. Next.
Really good discussion. Thank you for giving us some clarity around the things that you'd like to see in that committee. We'll go away and do some further work. I'll connect with Karen and others in the executive to polish up those terms of reference, ready for the next time we have a kōrero with you on this topic. So those two new committees were the only two that I've prepared slides for, because the other committees in the structure are a carryover from last term. So I don't want to exclude discussion on or limit discussion on any committee. So I've popped up the diagram here, and we'll just really ask for you to identify any committees that you'd like to dive into, and we'll have the discussion.
Ben.
Oh, I just wanted to raise, if you'd like to look at the workshop agenda for EPC, the item D says it makes recommendations to strategy and policy, blah, blah, blah. So if you're changing it for new one, you'd might want to change this and that would go directly to council as well, I presume. So that's just some, yep. If anyone's interested in, it's just an option. It's not an opinion, but 20. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Noel.
In terms of reference, Warren, on page 38 for the Waiora Committee, at the moment, we've got 5 elected members of council sourced from councillors who are within the Tūturi Paimana Aotearoa o Waikato Rohi. So basically the River, PC1 area, etc., etc. So I see you put an interest in that committee. So if you were to be on that committee, we would have to seek a change of terms of reference.
I actually, so yes, I did put my name down. I potentially see myself as possibly an alternate, if that works.
Well, I don't know. I don't want you to
under
be
the
tripped
current
up
report.
if you're going to be involved. And so maybe we could have some comment on that. Marty, you've been heavily involved in those calls with the Waiora Committee. And page 38 of the agenda. And so if you remember, we selected councillors from
within
that area. So
well, mine was just a desire to have a general oversight of it and how that may look and function.
But we don't want someone saying, well, you can't be here.
Yeah.
So let's sort it out now.
Chair is ex officio.
Well, yeah. So can we look at that?
Yep, we can certainly look at whether or not the terms of reference might need to be adjusted to accommodate an alternate that isn't from within. So leave it with me. I'll dive into the terms of reference and figure out whether or not it does need amending. If it does, we will need to discuss that with our River iwi partners. Thank you.
So just on the, Marley, it's obviously a committee of 5 and 5. Can I sit in the room without speaking? Yeah, so that's I'm happy to sit in that space. Yeah, I don't need to sit on it. Okay.
And any councillor, be they on welcome, although sometimes we've picked everyone out that isn't on the committee.
Oh,
No, we haven't elected.
Even the chief executive had to go.
Yeah. Tipper.
Kia ora, Marley. Just questioning, I guess, the role and function of EPC to enhance and improve our environmental performance. For as long as I've sat here, they've been backwards-looking reports that we've noted. We do most of our efficient environmental work in Stratton Pole and other places through, getting our right submissions in. And not taking away from those who have been on EPC, but I'm wondering, the first act of good governance is to not extend committees. It would be to add to and take two away. This is one that I would think, and I'll yield to the members of that committee. It could be an agenda in at some point, unless you think that the substantive agenda of EPC will be lost if it became a sub-function of Stratton Pole. Again, I used to be on that committee, unless its mandate has changed. It was receiving backwards reports and the odd forward funding request, and maybe texturing an environmental outcome that's still got to go through a strategy process. So again, if the ambit of the committee has changed, I'm welcome to leave. But I think, again, I'm pro-environment, not anti-farming, but I'm pro seeing this feedback in the right place, and I'm wondering if the environment conversation in its Stratton policy context, which is where we normally have the forward-casting stuff, is better placed than having an EPC that looks at back reports. I can do that as a councillor on an agenda item. I don't need a whole committee to read accountability reports, but I just sort of irresponsible of me not to say when my colleagues arrived with a clear mandate to shrink process, bureaucracy, etc., for us to grow it. So I'm saying APC is one I think we could recast and put somewhere else to have the other gains that were made. Committee structure. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'll respond to a couple of things. So the observation about strategy and policy, doing the forward looking, being responsible for those things. We, through the review process, did look at the whole policy cycle of our mahi and where each of the committees fit in that cycle. There are three phases to the cycle. One is the policy strategy development, there is implementation, and then there is monitoring. And so each of our committees fit into one of those phases. The Environmental Performance Committee is one of those monitoring committees. And so that's why you've correctly identified that it is looking at what's already happened. Yeah. The other thing that we did consider also is if we did decide that this committee perhaps isn't needed, looking for efficiencies, as you say, then its functions could be reallocated to other committees. And so we've done a bit of thinking already in that respect. I'm just looking at Brent to see whether he wanted to add anything to the conversation.
Councillors. So yeah, as Marley has identified, for the very reasons that you've noted, Tipper, we've had a look to see where the various things that report through to EPC could go in a structure that didn't include EPC. There are options, and if that's something that the council would like us to present to you as an option for you to consider, absolutely can present that as an option for you to look at.
Thanks, Brent. Jennifer.
Thanks. Yep, I back that. I mean, I don't want to have a performative committee just to say, hey, we still care about the environment. I think it goes through everything we do. It can't not when you used to be Environment Waikato, right? And so I'm just worried about the amount of content and the backward looking, like Tipper said. I've known for a while, there are pieces like B1 in the terms of reference, and there are things monitoring with the resource consents and the prosecutions. I mean, it's something that councillors don't really get decision reports on anyway. It could easily come to full council and just take it as read, and people can ask things offline as well. If we're going to do state of the environment monitoring, I think it came through really strong from the council last trinium that we want not just whatever the state of the environment report said, but the actions that come from it. And so that, I think, can be found in any of the other committees if we write it into the terms of reference that way. I'd love to actually see the state of the environment monitoring, showing how it links to why we do what we do anyway. So that would be part of it. And C, which is about giving effect to Te Ture Whaimana, I mean, we are going to be covering that off in every JMA as well, so it doesn't really need to come here again. Or we'll find a place, right? It's not a very frequent one. So I think a lot of it's information only, and it can be put in other places. And the last comment would be the word environment can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. I'd love for us to use the words ecosystem health a bit more often. And because it's, again, different to just monitoring biosecurity and biodiversity, which is a small segment of ecosystem health. But yeah, in case that's helpful.
Mike. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to endorse what Tipper said, but also that whoever we populate with these subcommittees or committees that have less than the full council, I think all councillors need to support those recommendations of the committee and the work that they've done that when they bring to full council. And also, if you're not happy with the information you've got to get involved in those small committees, make yourself available to either watch it online or, so you're well informed by the time it comes to full council. So I'd just like to make sure that that's clear that, sometimes, especially in CERC, sometimes there was a controversy on the other councillors weren't informed. Well, get involved. You can sit in and watch meetings and get involved or even turn up to them. So yeah, I just like to endorse that.
Thanks, Mike. Chris?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I just had a brief discussion with Janine earlier today about being a bit presumptive. I'm hoping to be involved in the finance area again. And I'd like to signal that I would like to, in terms of reference for finance, to expand the scope of it. There's two issues around council table over the last 3 years, which I don't believe have been sufficiently well addressed. The first one is costs, better burden costs imposed on our integrated catchment group. I know you've got, the catchment committee has got a special role in terms of what it does, and I don't think it's fair that it should be expected to focus on those areas as well. So I'd like to take that as part of the finance committee so we can put a lens on that. And also for transport, same issue. So I'm just signalling that I would like to review terms of reference for the committee for next triennium.
Okay, next time. Ben.
Yes, surprisingly, for someone who keeps talking about the economy all the time, I actually think we need to have the healthy environment. And I would advocate for EPC. I found it was a useful committee to sit in. It had a lot of useful information coming through. And I wouldn't like to see it disappear, particularly as we're removing climate. And when we had our workshop meeting the other day, it was asked, should we have committees of the whole? And the answer was no, you need committees because they can go away and deal with specific issues and then bring them back. The danger is we're going to overload Stratton Pole with everything dumped in again, and you don't get enough time to discuss all the issues through. So I was going to ask Katharina if she had a comment, given that she chaired EPC. If you had any thoughts, Katharina.
Before we get to this, can I just ask you one question of yours? With the environmental information, we'll get that anyway. That's one of our mandates. But what did we do with it? What decision did we use from EPC that enhanced any environmental outcome in the last triennium? Because if you can name it, I'll buy into it. But I know the resource consents that we looked at, some of the actions that were taken. But I can't say one of those reports that we picked up on the clams or anything and did something. So and I'm about the action, not the committee.
Well, we had state of the environment reporting coming through.
We would do that anyway.
Yes, but you got a chance to discuss it and a chance to network how it should be implemented. Some of these things are actually helping staff understand where we're heading to. Yeah, so Katharina?
Okay, yeah, please. No, I'll come to Katharina, yeah.
EPC. It's quite an important little group of people who the take, the kaupapa that comes to the table is very intricate. It is totally around about monitoring and environmental. Tipa asks, what have we done out of that? I believe if with Brent and his team, nothing, a lot doesn't come back to the council to do the work, but it does help emphasis on the staff on what they're doing to bring to the council in other areas. Yes, the state of environment last year was really kind of devastating in how we were going to work towards that. The good thing about this program, though, is that we get direct input from our ministers around the environment through Brent and his team. The rest that Tipa talked about resource consents and regulatory, that's right, that's statutory. It's
Hey, guys.
yeah. So I think over the last many years I've been involved, we're I believe done some good work in there. I don't see it any different from finance and risk, to be honest. I don't know why we didn't put that in the growth and resilience committee if we want to talk about some things like that. But I think it has a place. We are about the environment. That is one of our core jobs, and yeah, so that's my perspective. I think it's a good place. I'm happy to go with it.
Thank you, Katharina. Noel.
Can I move to integrated catchment?
No.
Hang on then.
I've got a question.
We'll finish on EPC.
Well, no, I'm to start on integrated catchment and move to. I'll explain. So, if integrated catchment, responsibilities, providing governance oversight to council, science, biodiversity, biosecurity, blah, blah, blah. I believe the placement of biosecurity and biodiversity into integrated catchment is like one of those things out to the side. And that, to me, biosecurity and biodiversity is part of business as usual within integrated catchment. We have to take it into account whatever we do. But the reality is we received some brilliant reports from Patrick and his team. Nice to know, but we were never really asked to make decisions. And it came back to council to spend all that money on clothing and whatever for every single person and whatever. But EPC, if I can find it again, I think the likes of the fire security, and we 2 or 3 times a year we met to dish out millions of dollars in grants to various organisations to
through the
improve
Natural Heritage
environment.
Fund.
Right,
Yep,
natural,
yep.
yeah, spend that money. I actually think that sits better within the Environmental Performance Committee because it's all the environmental stuff. And I would certainly ask that consideration be given for moving biosecurity and biodiversity as a subject to EPC. And I support having EPC, give them more work to do. But the reality is I don't think we need to receive it into integrated catchment. We need to focus on the catchment itself. So I don't know, Robbie, whether you want to add to that.
Robbie.
Right, I'd rather go back to the first question first. I sat on EPC for the last 3 years. I actually enjoyed being on the committee and the interaction that we had to have with Brent for the first 18 months of that committee of the implementation of farm plans. This committee is vital of understanding of how that's going to be implemented. And with PC1, I'd imagine this committee will then be implementing that work with farmers and stakeholders with. So this committee is vital. So I think to think it's going to be a pit of Stratton Pole will fall over backwards and won't know where to go if you put it in there. It's unfair to Stratton Pole. So that's just my for that. So I believe EPC is vital to stay there, and it's actually going to PC1 in this 3 years, how it's implemented and how it's going to be enforced out into the public or whatever the right word is, into the farmers and all the sectors and communities in the Waikato catchment. This committee's got and this Brent's team has got a huge workload in front of it over the next 3 years. So to say that it doesn't need a committee is, you don't understand how it's worked for the last 3 years. And I'm sorry, not all of you have sat on this committee. It's been a small group, and maybe the group should be made wider and bigger. And that's a fair statement because of the amount of workload that this committee is going to have to deal with in that 3 years. Maybe it should be 8 or 10. So I'm just thinking about that, I think, and how it's going to affect the Waikato. Maybe it needs a greater membership. I understand where you're going, Noel, but with the restructure of ICM, I'd like that to be something that's talked about during our triennium to shift it over, but I just don't want to. I don't want staff to feel we're putting another obligation on them to upset what's going on out there right now. But I'd be prepared to look at that once the restructure has been implemented and is working. I agree we should look at that within a year. And I think that's fair. I don't want anything else out there that's going to upset staff at the moment, because we've got a whole lot of staff that's still going through that restructure that is pretty big and heartbreaking to some of them. But I agree, maybe there is a better place for biosecurity and biodiversity, but I leave it to Warren to make that decision, and for us to go, we'll come back in a year's time and we'll relook at it. Well, maybe 9 months' time we should be coming back, not a year. So we got time to really give that a 3-month span. But right now, I just don't want to put that pain over our staff. If
Thanks
that's
for
fair.
thanks for those comments, Robbie, and just articulating that it is in the report that the terms of reference of committees can be looked at any stage, so we can do that as we work through the triennium. Jennifer.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and demonstrating I can change my mind. I'm just trying to add to the conversation. I love the content of EPC. I sat on it for 3 years as one of the active members prior to last traineum, and I even came along voluntarily last traineum. Love the content. If it has the terms of reference, if it's written to have more content, including say that PC1 staff, or if we incorporate biodiversity, biosecurity, so we can swap it easily when the time comes. State of the environment, I agree with the slightly bigger committee, because the big message out of EPC last traineum was everyone should be seeing more of that. It's core to what we do. And I love the emerging contaminant stuff that's already in there. So let's have it. Let's do it well though.
Yeah.
Like
not
don't
hard,
make it make it better.
Could I just say one more? I just don't want again, I'm not taking away from the mahi of EPC. I think it's really important, but whether it had enough scope to be useful to us was my question. And so not about the committee or its membership. Acknowledge the work that's been done. But all I'm saying, Robbie, is that we made that committee split off since I've been a councillor in my early days, and I just wanted to give us permission that it's not a sacred cow, you can put it back again. Likewise, we put into catchment biosecurity and biodiversity when I first started as a councillor. Now, if that hasn't worked, don't keep doing it. It's permission to change up a little bit. So do I want an environment committee? Yes, but I wanted one with enough scope to do some stuff. What I keep hearing from my colleagues though, is you have prevailing need to assure yourselves around PC1. Where's that committee? Or where's that clear work? Otherwise, it's going to be in every agenda. But where's the focused conversation about PC1? If that's what's on driving everybody's need for information, because then we should have one. Or is it an agenda item and Stratton poll? I just want clarity. Otherwise, it's on every agenda in a little way rather than on a substantive agenda in a way that we can all get around. Tērā taku pātai. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah, and I think we'll talk to that PC1 and potentially it's a working group, but we can certainly have that discussion. Gary, it's probably something you're going to speak to.
Yeah, fine, I'll speak. I totally support the committee with the EPC. I think that there's other factors that are out there, the koi carp and the workings in the Whangamarino, and there's lots of issues there that I think would be addressed. Am I correct? So yeah, I support exactly what you were saying there, Robbie.
Thanks, Gary. I'll come to Brent. I think you did want to make a couple of comments, and I'll come to Robbie, and then I think we might take a 10-minute break if everyone's agreeable. Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed from the committee, one of the things that I noted from the committee members through the last triennium was a regular comment to me that they wished all councillors were hearing what they were hearing, because there's a lot of information that comes through, in particular from our science directorate, around what's both what they're seeing in the environment, but also the risks that they see coming. And so that's why you would have seen the committee heard the state of the environment monitoring results and put a lot of effort into looking to see how the state of environment monitoring could be adjusted going forward to be able to build on the information that was coming through. So that's one of the things that we've been putting our minds to, around how when you have a small group of people that get to have an hour conversation with one of the scientists, to consolidate that into information that can be shared with all council. So I just wanted to note that was just one of the consistent pieces of feedback that I heard from the committee through last triennium. And so we're putting our minds to how could we, you've only got so many hours in your day, you've only got so much time, how could we provide for that, so that the sorts of things that Robbie has told me that he's learned from the scientists over the last 3 years can be passed on to everybody when you're making your policy decision making. So that was just wanted to share that was one of the pieces of feedback that I've been hearing from the past committee.
Thanks for that input, Brent. Robbie?
I actually think it's an integrated catch. Me and Noel had a good discussion about how do we get all the councillors around the table and to welcome everybody in, even though they weren't members of the committee. And I think it's about your agenda. If you've got other members that are interested in your committee and you have specific points that they're interested in, you put those items up first. And then everybody is welcome to come into that committee and have a talk, a debate. And when the papers that have finished, they can then move on and you can get on with what the flood protection and the drainage and all the other things. But at least everybody can be a part of the discussion. So it's about actually just having a good agenda and having it in the right format that everyone can participate in. And I think that's what we've got to get better at is our chairs and our deputy chairs have to help the discussion of bringing everybody into the room. And I think EPC can do that a lot better as well. That would be just my point of view.
Thanks, Robbie. Gal, did you have a last
Yeah, but
comment before we break?
Yeah, deputy chairs and chairs, yeah, I agree with you that, but it's councillors that need to, get involved. If something's involving not only in your electorate or something like region, then you go to that chair on that committee and say, how can you help? Because that's what I've done, even with stuff that needed done down Toval. I think we would need to be more proactive rather than creating more work for the staff. Is each councillor that's interested in something, turn up. You can sit in the back, or you can watch it on Zoom, or you can ask the chairs and deputy chairs. Let's get councillors getting involved. It's not up to chairs and deputy chairs, it's up to councillors as well.
Thank you. Okay, guys, we'll take a 10-minute break, which brings us back at 25 past. Please be prompt. Thank you.